Well, what makes Obama think that it's a good thing to go in there and that we can actually make a difference by doing so?
I have no idea. You'll have to ask him. But I imagine that, some of the, I'm so reminded, you talk about parallels with Vietnam. You remember that the people who marched us into Vietnam were the best and the brightest, all educated at Harvard and Cambridge and Yale. And here we are again with these very, very smart people. But they seem to have a giant blind spot when it comes to history and when it comes to politics on the ground. The Vietnam situation was lost before we went in. It was deeply lost by 68, but there continued this kind of ideology that somehow the French couldn't get it right, but we would. And I think that that's a perilous ground to stand on. I think probably Obama's in a situation where he doesn't want to be perceived as weak, where he wants to, create some kind of a stalemate. But the idea that they're actually going to bring democracy to that country, that they're going to defeat Islamic fundamentalism and so on, is a fool's errand and a dangerous one.
Bill, let me ask you this. You talked about President Obama a few minutes ago. How do you describe your relationship with President Obama?
Well, he described it as we once knew each other as guys around the neighborhood. I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, I knew him. We sat on a board together. We were neighbors. We saw each other in the neighborhood. And, of course, you see a lot of people in the neighborhood, and you wave at them, and you say hello, and might even chat. But it's not like because you have that kind of association, that you share politics or outlook or a lot of other things. I think he's very, very bright.
Is it fair to say that you support the policies of the president?
Right now?
Yes.
Oh, no. I said when I talked to you last time that while I felt that the election was an historic moment, to me, the most exciting thing about it was that when he was asked during the primaries who would Martin Luther King support, and his response was, King wouldn't support any of us. He'd be in the streets building a movement for justice. And I believe, and I've always believed, that, while it's important to influence politicians and government officials at the top, much more important is what do we as people want. If we want peace in Afghanistan, and I think overwhelming numbers of us do, we have to build the kind of social movement that will be paid attention to. And I don't think we've done that yet. So
Bill, you never shied away the last time we talked from the term radical. May I assume you're still comfortable with that title, or do you want to correct that for our listeners?
I'm sorry, what's the title? I missed that.
Radical.
Am I a radical? Yes. By radical,
are you still radical?
I mean, I want to go to the roots of things. I don't want to stay on the surface. I want to understand how things operate deep down. And that's what radicals do. They try to understand the link between war and warming, to take one example, between, the shredding of our civil rights and war. So, sure, I am a radical. I've been a radical my whole adult life. But that doesn't, and incidentally, many, many Americans are radicals. So there's, in a giant, wild, diverse democracy like this, there are socialists, there are radicals, there are right-wingers, there are racists. There's a whole range of possibilities. And yes, I am a radical.
I had a guest on the other day that said that he knew you from years back. David Horowitz was on. And many, many, many years ago, you and he probably were more closely aligned years ago, and now you two couldn't be further off. Were you friends with David Horowitz?
No,
and do you still keep in contact with him?
I never knew David, except that we were in the same movement. He was the editor of Ramparts, and I was an officer of SDS. I don't believe I ever met him until much later when he had moved to the right. But we were in the same movement. That's true.
Let me ask you this too. Sarah Palin made some comments the other day about you. Were you ever tempted to do an interview during the campaign to respond to some of Sarah Palin's remarks about you?
No, I never wanted to do an interview particularly. I wanted to stay quiet during the campaign because I felt that there was such a dishonest narrative out there that there was no way to interrupt it. But I have proposed to her people, and I even have proposed it in an article on me in the New York Times after the election, that we should start a talk show together. And it could be called Palin Around with Sarah and Bill. And then we could have a lot of people on, and we could take different perspectives, but she's never gotten back to me.
Actually, I've heard the palling around part. I've been chatting with some folks that travel in the same circles you do, and that was one of the notes they handed me, was to ask you about palling around.
Well, the thing about the way that Sarah Palin ran me into the campaign, and not just me, but Jeremiah Wright, Rashid Khalidi, many other people, The narrative that's so profoundly troubling isn't just the kind of smearing of me and the kind of trying to tag me with a single label that sums up, 65 years of life and work. That's not the big problem. The big problem is the assumption that if you talk to somebody, if you share a conversation, if you listen to someone, that therefore you're somehow tainted or you are responsible for that person's politics and policies. I hope and I believe that President Obama and a lot of other sensible politicians talk to a whole range of people without a political litmus test. They listen, but they have a mind of their own. I think that describes Obama.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Bill. Is there anybody? Let me go a different route. What issue are you the most passionate about right now? The single greatest issue?
Well, I think the single greatest issue that's going to define this presidency is the war, closely followed by healthcare and the economic crisis that the healthcare is a part of. And
healthcare, can I assume you're in favor of universal healthcare?
I'm for single payer, absolutely. And,
are you really? This is the question. No matter where we stand politically, how in the love of goodness are we going to pay for all these things, no matter how noble they may be? How are we going to pay for these things?
Well, the thing about single payer is that we are already paying 50% more than most civilized countries, and we don't get nearly as much. Where does that money go? It goes into the pockets of big insurance and big pharmacy and big medicine. Mm-hmm. It's absurd to say that somehow there's no money out there. There's money out there. It's being drained off by the big insurance companies. And people say, oh, we got to have our freedom. The Obama plan is very, very, I think, mild. It's not saying you have to give up anything. If you love Allstate, stay with Allstate. And there will be a public option that you can get if you want. You don't have to get it. Nobody's forcing you. All the lies that have been told are incredible. But I want to go back to the single payer.
Sure.
We agree, you and I agree, and I think most Americans agree, that there are certain things that ought to be public. That is, we have to pay for them publicly. So, for example, the fire department. I don't want to have a privatized fire department. I want a public fire department. Why? Because what if the guy next door to me doesn't want to buy the proper insurance? His house starts on fire, and I'm at risk. I can't go the direction of saying everybody should have that choice. I think we should agree as a society, we want good fire protection for everyone. We want good police protection for everyone. We want garbage pickup for everyone. So there are three places, or clean water for everyone.
Well, let's talk about the cost for just 1 second. Let me ask you this. Are you in favor for universal health care for not only U.S. citizens, but non-U.S. citizens also?
Well, again, this is a red herring that's been brought into the situation. We already pay for non-citizens. We already pay for the poor. How do we pay for it? Cook County Hospital here in Chicago. If you get sick and you don't have insurance, you go to Cook County Hospital. Guess who pays for that? Me. How come I pay? Because I pay taxes. So the idea that somehow, these guys should be left on the street to die, they happen to be working in the kitchens and in the daycares and in the homes of the wealthy, and you're saying, when they get sick, let them go? No, of course not. They'll go to a public hospital, they'll get treated, and taxpayer money will pay for them. Yeah.
Why isn't that part of our huge deficit problem right now? Whether it's right or whether it's noble, that we can argue that all day long, because obviously the noble thing to do is to help as many people who need help as possible. I think conservatives and liberals will agree on that. But what if you just don't have the money to do it? And isn't that breaking our system now?
Hey, Dan, we've got less than a minute left here.
Well, let me do this then. Bill, we'd love to have... Could you stay over for one more second? Because I'd like to ask you about Kathy Boudin. I'd like to ask you about Chesa and a few other more personal issues. If you're on for it, would you stay for one more segment with us?
Sure.
That'd be fantastic. CNN 1190, it's the Wall Street Shuffle, back with Bill Ayers and Dan Cofall in just a minute.